we've got science fiction for you this week on the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Yes, it's a look back at the very original season of Star Trek on NBC, starring Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner. Science fiction isn't exactly my cup of tea, but I do give a good old roughy tumble now and again. So join Bob Smith, Steve Gennarelli, and Brian R. Solomon on the new edition of the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Jolly good. Jolly good. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Outdated Entertainment Hour. My name is Bob Smith. On this special edition, the original Star Trek, we mean the original Star Trek that aired on NBC from 1966 to 1969. Two of your favorite guests are here. We have both Brian R. Solomon and Steve Gennarelli, a couple of professional podcasters, and they're here to entertain you as we all look back at our favorite Star Trek moments from the original cast and everything else. So, sit down a spell, as the Beverly Hillbillies used to say, and let's go back into sci-fi back when it was whimsical. We're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back with the history, the origins, some of the secrets you might not remember, and some of the history you probably remember about the original Star Trek. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. Ham radio operators are everywhere in your city, your area, your neighborhood, in any country you go to. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365, in case of natural or man-made disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, you name it, we're there. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/whatishamradio. See you on the air.
It's going to be a good show tonight because there are good people back with me here. I want to welcome back Steve Gennarelli. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to be back.
And two in a row for Brian R. Solomon. You getting sick of me yet or what?
I don't know. We need to stop meeting like this. This
I
is
know.
You're getting to be a habit with me, Bob.
Yeah, I know. And I hope you're having a good time. And by the way,
I love it.
The show about your great uncle was fabulous. It's to me that was NPR quality podcast. I mean, it to me it was a human interest story par excellence. The more you told me about your past with him, the better it got. It was just a home run. I'm very proud of that podcast. So thank you for doing it with us and with Adam, because it was like I've heard nothing but raves about it so far.
Thanks for giving me the chance and the platform. It's like I don't really get a chance to talk about stuff like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love wrestling, but it's nice to talk about other things sometimes. It's nice to have an outlet. And, you know, I've mentioned him enough times actually on my podcast that I actually posted the link to your show in my Facebook group for people that are curious, because they always hear me talk about him on the podcast. Him and my grandfather, it's almost like they're still around. I talk about them so much.
I'm glad to be a conduit to esoteric, as so to speak. And Steve, I got to tell you one more time. I think you're one of the most creative people in podcasting that I've met, because this guy is so full of ideas. I mean,
well, he came up with this. This was Steve's thing.
I know. Steve, why did you want to do Star Trek?
Well, I found out that Brian is a big fan like myself, and I was just curious because he's about 10 years younger than me. I was just curious, like, how did he find it? How did he discover it? And I know he's from New York. I'm from upstate New York. Bob, you're from New York also. So I want to hear all these stories. I want to hear how he discovered this show, and how it took us from maybe the 70s all the way up to the day. And Star Trek's definitely been a big part of my life. I mean, I think my way of thinking, when my folks died, when my mother died, I wasn't crying. I think, Spock's logical way, I think, rubbed off on me. Like, would Spock be crying? Probably not. So, things like that have influenced me. And I'd love to talk about the show with you guys tonight.
Great. Yeah, no, I have great stories about how I came to Star Trek. Absolutely.
Well, am I the only one who was a little kid when it was on? Am I the only person who have seen the original series when it was new? I think I am in this bunch. Am I right about that?
Of the three, if you saw it on NBC, what was that like, Bob?
I will say that I discovered Star Trek, and I didn't discover it till season 3, when it was on Friday nights at 10 o'clock. Yes.
Really?
I discovered it then and took to it right away. It was on after some comedies that were on ABC, and I was fiddling around with the dial looking for something to watch afterwards, and I just fell on it, and I went, wow, this is great. I like the action. I like the characters. And I really got hooked on it. But the trouble with discovering something in its 3rd season is you got to kind of go back to see seasons 1 and 2, which I didn't see until a few years later when it went into syndication. Actually, probably just 2 years later when it went into syndication in reruns. So then I got to see the complete series. But I'll tell you what, there was nothing else like it on TV. There was some sci-fi-ish stuff on ABC, Land of the Lost and all that other stuff. None of that was a charmer for me. But Star Trek hit me right in the feels. It had action, it had pretty girls, it was in outer space. It had all the things a young boy needs to grow up big and strong. So I was like, this is for me. And I liked every cast member. It's one of those shows that had one of the best ensemble casts you could think of, all perfectly cast in their roles. Do you guys agree with me?
Yeah, it did. It's an interesting thing because I know we're not going to dwell on the later Star Trek shows, which are some of it's good, but what they tried to correct on those later shows is really spreading the wealth with the cast members, giving them all more to do. And making it a little more even, sometimes to the detriment of the show. Because one of the things that made the original show so great was it was the Holy Trinity, right? You had Spock, Kirk, McCoy. They each represented different aspects of the human mind. You know what I mean? And the other characters, I'm sorry, I know they would always bitch and moan that Shatner was holding them down and all this stuff. And they definitely gave them more to do in the movies, but they just weren't as important, and that's okay. I mean, you had Scotty. He was like sort of like the one rung down from those three.
Right.
And then everybody else, Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov, and random other people that would show up like, like Kyle and O'Reilly and Dr. Mabenga would blaze in every now and then.
Sure.
But it was Kirk, Spock, McCoy. And I thought that was the show's strength. Later on it got a little watered down with the later shows where everybody needed to have their little storyline,
Oh, I don't know. Well, I used to look forward to each episode where they had, here comes Kirk calling down to the bridge, right? Scotty, how's it going down there? Oh, Captain, it's awful. The monster threw the engine out the portal, Captain. What am I going to do? It was every episode you'd see a fire in the background and he's sweating. His shirt is torn. Yeah. We're holding it together with rubber bands, Captain. It's just every episode. And I loved it.
That was great.
Yes.
Yeah. I was talking about on the later Star Trek series where there was so many characters in the cast and they were all kind of like much. They had much more meat to their characters, but I felt like because of that, there was less of a focus. Like the original show worked so well because of Leonard Nimoy, William Shatner, DeForest Kelley. I mean, that was
That's
the
right.
show.
Plus
That was the show.
the strangeness of outer space too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Steve, what hooked you?
So, as a little kid watching this, and I was like, I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, and Brian wouldn't know this because he's just a little bit younger, but WNEW in New York, Channel 5, which we got up in upstate New York, we were getting reruns of Lost in Space, which was the other science fiction show that was on TV, but science Lost in Space really leaned into comedy and campiness, kind of like Batman, and it was much more a family action adventure oriented show. But for a kid my age, this was a fantastic show. It couldn't have been any better. But I kept reading, like I was just an articulate young fellow. I was getting the New York Times every Sunday. I was reading through it, and I could see in the New York Times bestseller section all these Star Trek like trade paperbacks and novels. They were always in the top ratings. So I was saying, well, if I like this one show, I might like this even more. And at first, I kind of fought the temptation to watch this, and then finally, I think the first episode I ever saw was The Naked Time. I remember watching that with my brother and my aunts and my grandmother, who were big Trekkies, and I was hooked. I mean, from that moment on, I was hooked, and we would watch it. Whenever it aired, we watched from WPX in New York. And the time that I was discovering the show, it was on locally in Binghamton, and it was also being rerun like on a UHF station from like Syracuse, because it was like probably the most popular show in syndication in the early 70s. So that's how I discovered it.
Brian, how about you?
Well, for me, okay, so I was born in 1974. The thing was, so I was a Star Wars kid. That's what I'm trying to
Okay.
say. So
Okay.
it was a strange journey. In fact, I was even like slightly too young for the original movie. I did go to see it, but I barely remember. But so you had the three Star Wars movies, though. I was prime action figures, lunch boxes, the whole thing. Now, because everybody always talks about Star Wars versus Star Trek and this whole thing. But to me, like I knew about Star Trek because some of the older members in my family liked it, like the uncle that I talked to you about. He enjoyed Star Trek very much, and his sister and brother, who he lived with, they all enjoyed it. Apparently, my Sicilian great grandfather, who I never knew, he died before I was born, loved Star Trek. I don't know how much of it he understood, loved it. So I knew about it, but to me, I thought like, oh, Star Wars is so much cooler because it was made for little kids. And the other problem with getting into it was at the time in New York, it was on WPIX channel 11 in reruns at like midnight. It was on in the middle of the night. I think it came on after The Honeymooners or something like that.
Honeymooners
And
and the
so
Odd Couple.
I couldn't
Yeah.
I couldn't stay up that late. But here's what happened. I went on a family, this is a true story. I went on a family vacation to Disney World. We went down to Florida. We were staying, somewhere in a hotel. And for whatever reason, the syndicated channel in Florida had Star Trek on in the middle of the afternoon. And so there were a couple of days during the trip where we were in our hotel room, we were, drying off from the pool or whatever. And I finally got to really sit down and watch Star Trek. I was also a little older. I was about like 10 years old. And the other thing was that made my mind open to it is that Star Wars had ended. Okay. So Return of the Jedi came out in 83. And
That's
for
right.
people my age, there was a drought of like 15 years where we got nothing. So Star Wars, because I'm talking, this is like 85 now. Star Wars is done and gone. Now I'm watching this show and I'm thinking, okay, so the first episode that I saw, I still remember. It was Who Mourns for Adonis, which is the one where they go to the Greek god planet, right? But then, which is okay, that's okay. But then the second one was Amok Time.
One of the
And
classics.
that was it. I was in, and I still think that's my favorite show to this day. That's the one where Spock goes through the Ponfar and he has to fight Kirk and he thinks that he kills him and all that stuff. It's one of the best written, performed everything episodes that there is. I mean, the ending, one of the best endings ever. And so I got home from the trip and I immediately, when I got back to Brooklyn, started renting all the episodes on VHS from the video store. and I watched the entire run of the show. The first movie that came out that I was able to see was The Voyage Home, which is like the most fun, accessible one of all of them. So
That's
like
right.
by 85, 86, I was a massive Star Trek fan, and that's how it happened. I watched the whole thing like on video in one big run.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah, loved it. And then they moved it. Ironically, they moved it on syndication, and they finally put it at a more decent time so I could watch it all the time on Channel 11 too.
This is why today's a golden era for people who love reruns, because just turn on your streaming. Some streaming channel somewhere has got it on right now, and you can look at virtually every episode, which is really cool.
It's on Paramount Plus, the original show, and all the subsequent sequels are on there. But I will say, in the 70s when we're watching them on WPAX constantly on Channel 11, again, it was a dry spell. There were only 79 original episodes. NBC came out with the animated series, which was on for, I think, like 2 years, and they were okay. They were just fair, but it gave people that had a hunger for Star Trek and kind of introduced Star Trek to the younger people that were coming up. And then, because of Star Wars and all the success of that, they finally decided to come up with a Star Trek movie, and it
Right.
came out. And I remember going with my beloved aunt and grandmother, who are, of course, long gone now. But the funniest thing happened. We really enjoyed going to that movie. We really, really enjoyed it. So we're back in my grandmother's house after the movie. We're sitting there, we're getting ready for supper, and lo and behold, we're getting ready for supper. There's Star Trek on the TV right then and there, and it was the episode All Our Yesterdays, where Spock and McCoy go back in time or go another planet, and Spock falls in love with Mariette Hartley, and so we're sitting there, again, my grandmother and my aunt, and the episode ends, and my grandmother, always a wise woman, she says to me, "That was a lot better than the movie we just saw." I said, "You're right, Grandma, it was." But we, but then, a couple years go by, The Wrath of Khan comes out, and it was like it reinvented the whole thing all over again. Like Star Trek was cool again. You had
Yes.
Khan, you had a great story. Spock dies. I mean, it was well written. It took you on a great ride. Bob and Brian, what do you think about that movie?
Yeah, well, the problem with the first movie was they were trying to be something that Star Trek was not. They were
Right.
trying to be,
Right.
the whole reason it got made even was because of the mania from Star Wars. There was
That's
a lot
right.
of interest in science fiction. So they were trying to compete with Star Wars in the realm of all the special effects and
Right.
forgetting that's not what made it good.
Right.
And they were also going for this look, I love 2001. I love that movie. But Star Trek is not 2001. They were going for this very overly cerebral, like ponderous kind
Yeah.
of giant story. It just didn't work with those characters. 2 is when they hit their stride. And in fact, I remember reading somewhere that who the heck was the guy that was, because Roddenberry was out after the first
Oh, yeah.
movie. I
Harv
right?
Bennett.
Harv Bennett, right? That's the
Mhm.
guy. So Harv Bennett, when they wanted to reboot it with the second Star Trek movie,
Mhm.
he claimed that his idea was all along, I wanted to do a sequel to one of the original episodes because I wanted to really get back to what made the show good. So
Mhm.
he watched the entire series over and was thinking, like, which one could I do? Which is amazing when you think about all the other possibilities of what could
Right.
have been. But they
Right.
picked a really good one because Space Seed's one of the best episodes. And that, you're right, that's really when it really truly hit its stride. I mean,
Mhm.
2, 3, 4 is like a continuous story.
Right.
5 was a misstep, but 6 I thought was very good. I think they ended on a strong note with 6. Not quite as good as 2, 3, 4, but it was good.
I just remember seeing The Wrath of Khan at a drive-in theater. Way to go. I mean, it
I
was great at the drive-in.
I remember thinking I used to have this joke. I had friends that were oh, sorry, Bob, what were you gonna
I
say?
just wanted to the Highway Drive-In Theater in Coxsackie, New York, which is about 15 miles south of Albany, and it's still open with 3 screens. I
Wow.
just
I've
wanna
never
give 'em a
been to a
plug.
drive-in.
I am dying to get back up there and go back to the I spent so much time at that drive-in as both an adult and a kid. I would like to go back one more time. I really wanna see a film up there.
My friend was so obsessed with Wrath of Khan that he recorded, and people used to do this. I have heard of this happening other times. He recorded the audio of the movie on audio tapes, like from the TV.
Right.
And he would play the tapes in the car and listen to the movie on tape. And, we used to do the lines and do all the different, the dialogue. I mean, it was just, what was it? I've done far worse than kill you, Kirk. I've hurt you. And I wish to go on hurting you. We used to do all that stuff. And right. Con, you bloodsucker. Like all that kind of stuff. But what was I going to say about that? When I first saw it as a small child, because remember I had these older relatives.
Sure.
I wasn't all that impressed. I just think it's the kind of thing where you have to have watched the original series first to really get the appreciation. Because I used to have this running joke when if you want to know the power of branding and marketing, right? When you strip away the Star Trek brand and everything and all the baggage that comes with it, you're looking at a science fiction epic film pitting William Shatner against Ricardo Montalban. How does that possibly work, right? It sounds like something that would not be a good idea, but it's fantastic, and it's because it's Star Trek.
Right. But I'll tell you guys one funny, my take on this. Back in the 70s, when Star Trek was really at the kind of the peak of its fandom, and there was all these nonfiction books coming out about it, and analyzing every episode. Space Seed never came up once. It was like the great ignored episode. Nobody thought it was anything special. And then Harv Bennett, with his infinite wisdom, sees it. Hey, I'm sure part of it was, Ricardo Montalban was still a known name. He was Fantasy Island, and he's living. It was not like he passed away. Let's use him. Let's put him in the movie. But it's funny that all these experts, all these people writing these best-selling books, they always thought that Space Seed was an ordinary episode.
Yeah, and you had I liked how they had the references to the episode in the movie, because they explained what happened to his crew and what happened to his wife, who was part of Kirk's crew, who went down there to live with him. And I remember even thinking, like, Khan kind of has a point here. Like, why would you never go back and see how they were doing? Why would you just leave them there and just, they're going to be fine. Don't worry about it. It's like Kirk even says in Space Seed, he says something like at the end, right? Doesn't he say, "Oh, it'll be really fascinating to come back here"? Oh no, maybe it's Spock who says that.
That's right.
And
Spock
see what has grown from the seed you planted here, or something like that. And it's like, well, nothing good.
A sandstorm, essentially.
Right. This is SETI Alpha 5.
Bob, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I want to get back to the series, and I'll tell you why.
Please.
The charm of it.
Yes.
Close your eyes and think of the sound in the
ambient
bridge.
Enterprise bridge.
The ambient Enterprise sounds in the USS Enterprise. The door going up. This little squeaky space noises in the back. Ting, ting. It was, after a while, it became like your home away from home. Every episode was based.
It did.
It was like the it was like the kitchen in The Honeymooners. This was their hub. This is where everything emanated from on Star Trek. And you know what? You started to really believe that that's what it sounds like in space. That those little squeaks and little bloop, bloop noises and whatever else you heard in that bridge was outer space. Not to mention the wonderfully cheesy special effects. I mean, the transporter, please. I mean,
which is why I want to say something about that, because I don't know how you feel about this, but I am very much against these remastered episodes that I guess they first came out with. What was it, like 10, 15 years ago?
2009.
Now those are the only ones available. They basically replaced all of the space effects with modern effects. And I'm thinking, first of all, yes. In fact, those are the only episodes that are available for streaming currently, right?
You're right.
Sure.
If you have the Blu-rays or the DVDs, you can go to the original footage. But you're right. On the ones that are still syndicated, or the ones you're going to see on the Paramount Network, they are the remastered versions. And even I'll even go farther, Brian. the opening theme, which is iconic, they mess with the opening theme, and I think they made it a lot worse. I thought the original theme to Star Trek was great, and now they take
Right.
that solo of that, and they really like lift it up
Wait.
really high, and it's
All right, I have
embarrassingly
to
bad.
jump in here. I
Okay.
have to jump here. Let's go to the theme. First of all, I'm agog that they remastered the sound on the show.
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah.
why was that necessary? But here's
Forget
the deal.
about the sound. They replaced all the special effects.
Right.
But
Like
it was
all the planets, all the exteriors of the Enterprise are now computer generated.
right.
Right.
Well, I went back and watched obviously the first 2 seasons of Star Trek, and I remember the
Mhm.
theme, which was just orchestral on the
Right.
first season.
Yes.
Right.
Then all of a sudden in season 2, and I'm like, where did this come from? Now as a kid, I was offended. I'm like, I like the original theme. What is this woman?
That's
I
What
like
right.
is she
bongos.
doing? Yeah, and I'm like, what in the world? So now as a comedy device that my wife thinks is hysterical, I use that voice on other television themes.
Oh, really?
Like, watch I don't wanna tell you know the show, but I will just add a ridiculous high-pitched female voice to whatever the theme is, and
Mhm.
she either laughs or goes, "Will you shut up?" So it's about a 50% hit to miss ratio, but
I don't know
why
why.
do they add that? And did you know there are lyrics to that song?
Yes, but I don't know them.
I don't know them either. I don't think they
I
ever
think
used them.
Well, I think the lyrics was another device for Gene Roddenberry to make money, rip money off from the show, and basically to give him a writing credit so he can get residuals each time it was played, something like that.
But I
You
don't
know,
ever
and
recall hearing the lyrics, so I read that they did lyrics,
yeah, they
but I
were
never
never
heard them.
used. But
Yeah.
we were talking earlier about the ensemble cast of the show, and I think what happened too in the 70s when there were only the 79 episodes being shown. I think Gene Roddenberry, he started to get this complex that he thought he was like, the creator of Oz or something, and he thought he was more important than he really was. I mean, I give him credit. I mean, he what he created with the show and all the concepts like Starfleet and the Federation, that was all really incredible. But like all the actors too, the George Takeis and the Walter Koenigs, they're all going to these conventions, and because all these people come out to see him, they think that they're the star of the show, so they're getting a head case thinking, well, why is Shatner getting all the lines in the movie? Well, because he's the star of the show. That's why.
Yeah, because he's Captain Kirk. That's why.
Yeah,
I mean,
I really could give a rat's patootie about what the rest of the cast thought of William Shatner. Somebody has to be the lead. Sorry, guys.
right.
Yeah.
No, I
And I
agree.
love George Takei. I love
They're all
funny
good.
guy. He's got a wonderful life story. I'm an admirer of George Takei, but you know what? I'm there for the show, guys. I don't. Again, this is like wrestling. I don't care about. I don't want to hear about the locker room scuttlebutt. I just want to
Right.
watch the action.
Great moments for Sulu and
Oh
Uhura
yeah,
and Gecko.
Mm.
Like they had their moments. Like Sulu's got the famous, where he's, I think, what is it, Naked Time, right? Where he's running around the ship with the
Mhm.
sword,
Right?
Richelieu beware, like all that.
Yeah,
They
Mirror,
all
Mirror.
have
They
their,
both had some standout moments there.
him and Uhura are
Mhm.
great in that, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they are just supporting players, and
They
that's
are.
the way the show was laid out.
They
But
are.
yeah, the special effects thing drives me nuts because why in the world do you feel the need to eliminate, things that gave the show its character and its flavor?
right.
Right.
Even in the 60s, those special effects were not state of the art. Those were pretty cheap effects. But that's fine. That was part of what made the show endearing. I mean, are you going to then replace the hairstyles and the clothing? Like, are you going to, you know what I mean? Are you going to replace Shatner's voice so it's not as stilted? I mean, where do you stop with this?
I'm bummed out just hearing this because I'm resting on my memories of the original broadcast.
Well, because
So
part of it is because I know so much about the show and how it was made. I'm also thinking, you know what? People worked very hard on those effects. You read
Right.
about how they built the models and how they filmed it and how to hang it and all the green screening of the planets and they're just
Right.
like, nah, we're just gonna throw that away and replace it. I just really bothers me a lot.
it
Right.
was of
I
their.
agree with
It was of its time. It doesn't need
its
to be
time, right.
modernized. It needs to be of
No.
its time. But you know what? Great performance is all. I mean, we'll talk about Shatner. Shatner was great in that role. He was the swaggering, ever confident, ever smart Captain Kirk. I mean, come on. Who didn't want to be Captain Kirk when they were 11 years old, right?
And the thing about Kirk is he became, in later years, with all the parodies and all the, kind of things, he became, the way he's remembered is far more of a caricature than what the character really was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that bothered me about the remake, which also has some pretty decent things about it. But the one where it was Chris Pine playing Kirk
Right,
and
right.
and Zachary Quinto as Spock. The more times I watch that, the less I like it. When it first came out, I did. But part of it is they stripped away. Kirk is not just, as much as we like to laugh and joke, he's not just this womanizing, swaggering, macho frat boy kind of. He's very intellectual. He's almost like a fatherly figure on the ship. He's a deep thinker. He's a very emotionally intelligent person. He's a deep person. He quotes Shakespeare. They reduce him down to the most easily uh, parodizing parts of his character. Like when you watch Chris Pine play him, he's just a meathead. He just plays him as some goofy meathead who just shoots from the hip and doesn't think and just and he's looking at every girl that walks by, and it's just a very unfair reduction of what that character was really supposed to be. The character's much more mature than that. I
No,
thought.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, physically, I don't think they could have found a better actor to play
Sure.
Kirk than Chris Pine because he can pull off a great Shatner impersonation. That Carl Urban who played McCoy in the films was fantastic. He
That
was the
was amazing.
standout to
Yeah.
me. He was amazing, and Zachary Quinto as Spock. I wasn't really sold on that, but again, of course, of all the three roles, that would be the hardest one to try to do justice with. Just because Leonard Nimoy was so incredible in that role.
Nobody has, because there's also a Spock on the new Star Trek Brave New Worlds. There's
Right.
a guy who plays the young Spock who served with Pike. Nobody can capture the perfect balance that Nimoy did. It's funny in a way because he's playing a character who has no emotions, and yet it's such a fantastic performance because Spock has a sense of humor. For a guy with no emotions, he has a very wry sense of humor.
Yes, he does.
He's got emotions under the surface, but he's also very cool and collected. He's very, mature. And again, in the movie version, he is an emotional wreck. I mean, the
Right.
character
Right.
is the most emotional Vulcan you've ever seen in your life. He's constantly on the verge of exploding. He's completely emotionally unstable.
He's
He
very
has
violent.
none of he's violent. He has none of the wry wit or the little eyebrow, like none of that sort of like droll kind of very judgmental Spock. I mean, none of those endearing qualities are there. Again, both of those two top characters, I think they got them very wrong in the remake
Yeah,
version.
I hope that they bring them back. I hope they do a better job. I'd like to see them tackle Mirror Mirror. I think that would make for a great movie. But
Sure.
Shatner was always my favorite actor on the show. But I think what Leonard Nimoy was able to accomplish with Spock is just it's up there with Gandolfini as Tony Soprano. It's just a
100%.
remarkable performance. I mean, it just the like you said, the depth of the layers of Spock. There's so much to him as Spock. It's just incredible what he did in that role.
He never has to overdo it. Like you always get the sense that there's a sadness underneath. He's part human. Part of him doesn't want to have to be this way that he is. Like, it communicates so much, yet he never feels like he's out of control. Or, I mean, there are the episodes where he's out of control, but as a general rule, another running gag I had with my friend was we had certain episodes that we would call Spot Goes Bananas, because every now and then
Hot
there
goes
would be
bananas.
an episode spot where Spock would go bananas, and
Like
Amok
this side.
Time is one. Yeah, where he would just go nuts. And those were very good, but it was good because it was rare. It wasn't all the time,
Well, one thing I want
Naked
to add.
Time also.
Well, one thing I want to add to you guys, because you're both from the world of magazines, and as a fan of Star Trek, the magazines for me played a major role. I discovered Star Trek like around 1973. This thing called Starlog began around 77, and I was a fan of that. I would buy it when they had a Star Trek theme on the cover. But when Star Trek 2 came out and it became a hot item, I started to get Starlog again. I know a few years after that, because I was following all the other Star Trek movies, I would get Cinefantastique, which was a really, really well done magazine. And I really enjoyed those magazines. They really enhanced my enjoyment of the movies and and following Star Trek as a whole. And I miss those days. I miss going to Barnes and Nobles and seeing all these movie magazines and getting them. And I've kept a lot of them. There were at least a few that I could keep. I kept them. But I miss those days of magazines. I mean, it's just those were good times.
I collected Starlog. I read Starlog through from like the mid 80s to the late 90s. I used to have every one. There was a section in there, I'm sure you would know, Steve, where they would list all the movies that were coming out. This is before the internet.
Oh,
You know,
right.
the month and the year that they were expected, and you'd look and you'd go, they're doing another Indiana Jones movie. Oh my God, they're doing this. Oh wow, this is coming out. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? All these things and that you had to look forward to. But you know what? The same thing that happened that with wrestling magazines for me happened with Starlog, because when the internet came in and you had websites that were like Ain't It Cool News or
Right.
Dark Horizons and Coming Attractions, I stopped buying Starlog, just like I stopped
Right.
buying wrestling magazines for a number of years because of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
No, I
That's how
did
it
too.
worked too.
I did too.
Yeah. Well, you guys got a favorite episode?
I have. Well, I mean, I guess it would be the one I mentioned. It's kind of a boring pick because everybody loves it. It's not some obscure episode, but
All right.
Amok Time, I think, is the one that always pops in my mind. I mean, I love Journey to Babel because as a kid, I just loved seeing all the different aliens all hanging out together. Like the Tellarites and the Andorians are here, and because you never got to see all that. But Amok Time, the whole thing with Spock thinking that he's killed Kirk. I mean, it's one of the, and it also has that music theme. We used to call it the sad Spock music. It's that guitar theme. You know what I'm
Oh,
talking
right.
about? Ba-da-dum, bum, 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 ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Like that's the sad Spock music. Because at the very end, I mean, I'll never forget it. It always stuck with me when, he goes through this whole ordeal. He thinks he's killed Kirk, and
He's ready to
T'Pau,
resign.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
she says to him, "Live long and prosper, Spock." And he says, "I shall do neither, for I have killed my captain and my friend." It's just perfect. Those are the kind of moments that makes that show a cut above everything. And then when they play the practical joke on him at the end, when he thinks Kirk is dead, and then Shatner's there, and Spock turns around and he goes, "Jim!" And then he very quickly bottles it all back
You're
up
right.
inside again.
That's right.
These are the things that just make it such an absolutely special and unique show. Just nothing like it. Nothing like it.
All right, Steve, what's your favorite episode?
I used to always say probably like a piece of the action, just because I like more humorous episodes. That was the one with the Chicago mobs of the 20s. One show that I really kind of refallen in love with in recent years, whenever I see the show, is Corbomite Maneuver, which was one of their earliest episodes, and that's the one with Baylock and Drink the Tranya. And what I like
Little,
about
yeah,
Clint
Ron
Howard,
Howard's
little Clint
brother,
Howard.
right?
Right. But what I like about that one so much, I think that's one of the most Star Trekiest of episodes. It's a lot of it's on the bridge, a lot of it's on the other part of the ship in sick bay. Bones and Kirk are going back and forth and sharing a drink and commiserating, and it just seems like such a classic Star Trek episode. I really enjoyed that one.
Well,
How about you,
I'm gonna
Bob?
go with the episode that all the kids love because I was a kid when I saw it, The Trouble with Tribbles.
Of
Classic.
course, yes. That would
Right?
always get number one ranking whenever they would rank the episode.
Because kids watched it when it was originally on, and
Right.
you needed to laugh. For once, our heroes were frustrated. It was unlike any other episode, and they needed a little comic relief, and I think it worked like gangbusters. So that's the kind of thing that sticks in your head all those years later.
No, that
I don't
was
know
a
if you
very
guys
fun one.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but this sounds like a perfect Brian Solomon road trip for him and his young family. Up in Ticonderoga, New York, there's a Star Trek original series tour where they have every room from the classic show, the bridge, sick bay, the transporter room, Kirk's quarters. I mean, they have every room reimagined, the corridors. And I could see Brian Solomon taking his lovely wife and his young son up there, and then they can get beamed around to different areas. And I guess Shatner's going to be there this summer. David Gerald, who wrote the Troubles episode, was just up there. So something to think about.
A friend of mine went there, I think. Now that I put it together, I didn't know where this was, but he posted a bunch of pictures of himself on the set of the original show, and he lives in upstate New York. So this must have been where this guy went. I had no idea about that. That I would love. And again, I'm trying to stay away from Star Wars here, but I know I would love this because one of the best experiences I ever had. I was like a complete idiot. My family was ashamed of me. We went to they have the Star Wars themed area in Disney World now,
Okay.
and they have a ride that simulates the Millennium Falcon. And when I tell you, when you go in this thing, it's the Millennium Falcon. I mean, you are in it and you're sitting in the cockpit, and it's a simulation where they even have you hit the hyperspace and the thing goes and the star. I was losing my mind like I was a kid. I
You marked that for
completely lost myself. I was just like, let's go into hyperspace. I'm just screaming and yelling. My kids are looking at me like, are you all right, Dad? Like, I'm sure I'd be like that. I'd have to sit in Kirk's chair and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Just don't jettison Finney in the pod like he did in Court Martial or whatever episode that was.
That's right. Court Martial was a very good one, especially
Yeah.
I appreciate that one now more that I'm older because it doesn't have a lot of action in it. It's very talky, but it's very, very good. It gives you, I like the episodes that give you the sense of the bigger Starfleet and Federation that are
Right.
out there, that it's not just this one ship in space, that there's a lot of other people. I enjoyed that a lot. I love the Doomsday Machine. I love that.
Mhm. One thing I think that we have to say, if someone is listening to this who maybe isn't familiar with Star Trek, I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but I think another reason why the show was so popular was just the message that it conveyed that we're going to live in a world in the distant future, which things like racism and hunger and violence and all these negative things that are in our current society, these are all going to be a thing of the past. We're going to be living in a world of harmony. Of course, we know there's Klingons and things like that, but other than those dramatic things, I mean, it really provided this story of a hopeful future. And I always thought we would, get there until the last couple of years, but I have a feeling we can get back on track eventually.
No, you're right. It's like a story of cooperation and honor
Mm,
and duty and selflessness. And I mean, think about it. These people, everybody has a family, but these people seem to live on that bridge. They were there like all the time.
right.
Very rarely did they say, let's drop down to Utah for a burger. They're all right where they are. A-
Well,
And,
on the
and I
next
think,
generation, they allowed their families to travel with them, and
Mhm,
I always thought that that was a real recipe for disaster.
right.
Like, there was a school on the Enterprise for the children of the crew members and things like that, and I just don't think they thought that one through.
mm, maybe not. Let's get back to a little bit of, you know, factual esoterica about the show now.
Please,
It was
please.
produced by Desilu.
Mhm.
And Desilu was the company founded by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball as a film and television production company, and it was really successful. They did Mission Impossible, they did Mannix, they did, The Untouchables
Mother-in-law.
was one of their first
Mhm,
hits,
mhm.
and Lucy sold Desilu, which later became Paramount Productions later on.
Yeah, Gulf
But
Western.
I think they sold it exactly right, Gulf and Western, in the middle, you're absolutely right, and I think that, it was between seasons 2 and 3 that she was no longer affiliated with the show.
That's
But,
right.
the show was a bomb. In reality, the NBC tried to cancel it after the first and second years, but letter writing campaigns from the fans said, "We love this show, please keep it on." But the Nielsen's didn't agree, and the thing really tanked when they sunk it by putting it on Friday nights at 10 p.m. 'Cause kids couldn't watch it, adults weren't interested in it because they were going out on Friday nights, and it died an almost unnoticed death. It wasn't until the reruns went into syndication that it almost instantly became a cultural phenomenon. The only other show I can equate to its success after being a bomb was The Odd Couple.
Right.
The
That's
Odd
right.
Couple was on for 5 years, and ABC tried to cancel that every year that it was on.
Right.
And then when it went into syndication, bang, it was a hit and ran for 25 years. Star Trek probably right now is on some TV channel somewhere as we speak. Proof's in the pudding. It's such a likable show. I mean, you know what it was? I really think it was sci-fi for people who aren't into sci-fi. There was
Mhm.
too many elements to it. It wasn't just strictly, you know, monsters and chases and lasers. There was a lot to Star Trek. Psychological things. There was racism
Right.
was broached. All different kinds of mature things that many TV series weren't touching, with the possible exception of The Twilight Zone, to be honest with you.
It was sci-fi, but it didn't get. I mean, it was more science fiction than Star Wars, which was basically just an adventure, you know. But with Star Trek, it was less about the minutia of all the scientific concepts and technology, which is, I think, what really made some of the later shows, it bogged them down because they just got caught up in all this techno babble. The original show, the specifics of the science was not what was most important, but it was the big concepts, the big ideas of this utopian future and on all that kind of stuff, which was very hopeful, like you said, but they still found a way to have conflict all the time, you know?
Mhm.
And and I wanted to say, but they never. That's why I didn't like later on where they would introduce and started kind of in Star Trek 6, but it continued later on. They would introduce all these elements into the Federation where, oh, maybe it's not as utopian as we thought, and it's kind of corrupt, and there's people and I'm thinking, this is really not what this is supposed to be. You're getting away from, that kind of cynicism doesn't really belong in Star Trek, There's a way to avoid it. Because there was something, you guys hit it on the head, you said it before, and I want to say it. There's something very comforting about the show.
Yeah.
I rewatched the whole thing a number of years back with my wife, who also had watched it when she was a little girl in syndication, and it was like you said, it was like going home with old friends. Every episode, it's like you feel like the Enterprise is your home. There's just something, even though you're you're on the verge of being killed every week, it doesn't matter. There's something comforting about visiting that world, and just the characters are so likable and so well written. That's what makes it good. It's not about the special effects. It's not about the technology. It's the writing of the script and the characters. That's what made it magic.
Mhm. You
And
didn't
and
care
I
about the styrofoam rocks at all,
No.
but
Yeah.
you could live with it because there was so much good writing. Let's face it, some of these are really well-written shows too.
They
I
had
mean,
great science fiction authors writing those episodes.
exactly right.
Harlan Ellison comes immediately to mind. He did City on the Edge of Forever. He was a brilliant writer. Theodore Sturgeon, like all these big names of, mid 20th century science fiction. These were novelists and short story writers. It wasn't just some hacky like TV writer's room. It was legit.
It's a unique show in that you can watch it as a child, as we did back in the 70s or the 80s. You can enjoy it for what it is as you're a child or a teenager. But then when you revisit as an adult, you can enjoy it on a completely different level. It is a sophisticated show. I mean, if you go back, and I went back and looked at all the other shows that were on in that time frame, I mean, most of the stuff that was on TV in 1966 when it premiered were shows that were either westerns or variety shows or musical shows. I mean, the other dramas on TV were shows like The Virginian and Bonanza and Gunsmoke. I mean, Star Trek was provocative. It had a certain sense of sex appeal to it. It had a sophistication to it. It talked about the future in a in a way that was not a insulting way. It was kind of an informed viewpoint on that show. And I think the reason why we're talking about it tonight is just because it's almost like it's a forgotten thing now. I mean, I know, as we said, there's a new Star Trek on the Paramount streaming service, but the original show, I think it's almost forgotten now. It's been removed. It's been a number of years since there's been any new movies, and we forget about how great the original crew really was.
Yeah. It's hard to keep it going because of, just human mortality, right? I mean, the original cast could only go so far, and because that's what it felt like for a while there, even though the show was a show of the 1960s, because the cast was still around and they were still doing things, and there were movies and there was vitality. Star Trek, the original Star Trek, really endured into the 90s. It was very
It did.
much like a present thing in popular culture, the 70s, because that's when everybody missed it, the 80s, the 90s, and then, everybody got old. That's what are you
Yeah.
going to do?
One of my 10 top favorite sketches of all time on Saturday Night Live was Shatner at the Star Trek convention. Does anybody else remember that sketch?
I remember
Get
that.
a
The Get
life.
a Life. Yes.
I think that's the origin of the phrase "get a life." I think that skit was where it started.
You, you with the Spock ears, ever kiss a girl?
Right.
I
Talk
But
about biting the hand that feeds you, though.
Oh,
That
it
was a
was
ballsy
so
move.
good. It was such a great sketch, and,
but
I'm
when
sure it was all satire, and I'm sure the Shatner didn't feel that way, but the fact that he did it anyway is just who doesn't remember that sketch? Poor Lovitz.
Oh, what about the one from the 70s where
Belushi,
Belushi is Kirk
yeah, he was
and
great
Oh,
as
and,
yeah.
Kirk.
uh, Aykroyd is Scotty, I think, right? And, Chevy
Chevy
Chase is
Chase.
Spock.
Spock,
Yeah.
yes.
One thing we haven't talked about, just as I know Brian wanted to talk about this a little bit, we talked about kind of the heyday of Star Trek, some of their best episodes. And when it got sent to that graveyard shift on Friday nights, it became the third season, which is now kind of an infamous third season for the diehard fans. The episodes really seem to fall off in quality. But I know Brian, you said there's some that you actually like from the third season.
Yeah, so, again, and it benefited me when I watched it. I binge watched the 3 seasons, in short order, over a few months' time or whatever, and it is true. I didn't really realize this until I watched them all in succession. There is definitely a dip in quality in the 3rd season. I didn't really notice that. I heard people talk about it, but then when I went back and watched them in order, I'm going, "Wow, really? There really is," because it's almost like I think the 2nd season's overall the best. It was kind of a peak where they really hit their stride. But I do like some things about the 3rd season because I don't know if they were doing this on purpose or if it was just because the actors were so familiar with each other by this point. But the 3rd season, to me, is where you start to get a sense of the real camaraderie of the entire crew that would bleed over into the movie series, where you really get a feeling like they're all friends, they're all very tightly knit. You don't really get that in the beginning. There's much more of
Right.
like a coldness to it because everybody's new. But in that 3rd season, they start to actually feel more like a family. I don't know how to describe it. And there does seem to be more of an effort to write more material for the supporting characters. Like they are
That's
doing a
true.
little bit more. But like, okay, so a great one. Tholian Webb, that's season 3.
Right.
I love that episode. That's phenomenal because
That's one of my
you got
favorites.
Kirk in the environmental suit where they're acknowledging for the first time that there's actually no air in space because you see these people traveling through space and they never wear any breathing apparatus or anything anywhere they go. So that was an interesting one with the Tholians because they're very strange aliens who I'm pretty sure were just a painted sheet, in front of the screen. There's another one that I love in that 3rd season. Oh, you know what? And this one gets maligned because I guess it is a little bit on the nose and whatever, but I love the one with Frank Gorshin. What Let This Be Our Last Battlefield
Right.
with
Right.
well, he's black on the left side and white on the right side. I'm black on the right side and white on the left side. I mean, yes, it's a very on the nose racial commentary, but it's still it's
It
I
works.
still think it's a very well done episode. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, you also get Spock's brain, which is I think in season 3, which
Yeah.
has to be the worst episode of the whole show. But there are some gems in there. Yes,
It's funny how perspective, because that's what brought me to the dance was the
that's
third
because
season.
that's when you discovered it. So it's
Yeah.
different
So
perspective.
I never thought of it as the worst. In fact, because I went back when it went into syndication, started to watch the first season, I thought the first season looked cheesier than the third season in terms of the look and the production of the show. I just thought
Which
it
might be
didn't,
true. I think that might
which I
be
think it
true.
is true. It looked very plain in the first season, and
Right.
I think they spiffed it a little bit by season 3. It made it look a little more, I don't know, together, realistic, whatever the word.
There was a lot more color in season
Spock's
3
a little-
for whatever reason.
Yeah. Spock's a little rough around the edges in some of those first episodes where he's
Oh
he's
yeah,
got like
he's 3/4 Vulcan then, right?
yeah, we used to call it yelling Spock, where he's just
Right.
yelling for no reason, and he's got his choppy bangs and eyebrows are at the wrong
Yes.
angle.
I was gonna say in the pilot, he's got these Bela Lugosi eyebrows, right? And it's like,
There's
whoa,
a couple
looks
of them.
demented,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Excuse me,
Space
Steve.
Hippies episode is, I think, season 3 too.
It is.
a
All
pretty
right,
bad-
Way to
all
eat.
right.
that's a bad one. Way
That's
to
a
Eat.
bad episode, yes. Which episode was it where, forgive me, my memory's not great, but I remember Spock sinking his fingers into this mass.
Yes,
The Devil in the Dark.
Porta. Right, Devil in the Dark. And is that season 3? I think
Season
it
1.
is. That's season 1. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
And I
That
thought
is a fantastic episode.
Nimoy's acting in that was beyond. It was very intense for a television show, I thought.
Yeah.
Because it was so psychological. He's getting into the mind of this creature.
Right.
And I thought it was brilliant. That one really had an effect on me. Because I was still wearing short pants at that point. I thought it was really heavy.
No, I was just going to say real quick, I liked the episodes that would occasionally have a very exotic alien life form. That's why I like
Mhm.
Tholian Web and I like Dancer in the Dark, Dancer in the Dark, Devil in the Dark. Because a lot of the time, and this was a shortcoming of the show, and even Next Generation did this, like 90% of the aliens were basically, they just look like people with like
Right.
something glued to their forehead or
Yeah.
something, or like a thing coming off the top. I liked when they would have an alien that was truly alien, like the Horta is just this blob, I like
Right. Right. Well, what I was going to say was about you're talking about how like Spock, it took a little time for him to get it down. I think that the second pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, with Gary Mitchell and Kirk and all that, if you revisit that, it's amazing that Shatner as Kirk is so perfect in that episode. It's like he nailed it in his first go. He's Kirk right off the bat. He's perfect.
That's very true. He really is. He really hits the ground running. The biggest difference, I think, is he gets sideburns in season 3. That's about it. Other than that, he's pretty.
Yeah, they all have the Trekkian sideburns, the pointy sideburns. Yeah.
We're all bearing our lead. We're all young when we discovered Star. Come on, the Space Babes. Come on.
Yep. There's
Mariette
that.
Hartley, please.
I like
Mariette Hartley. Jeez. I'm not made of wood. There were some pretty girls on Star Trek.
and who's the one in the Gamesters of Triskelion who wound
Angelique Pettyjohn.
She did porn or something, didn't she? Or something like that?
She was a Playboy girl.
Playboy. Okay. Playboy.
She had been in Get Smart. She had been in some other 60s shows. And but I like Madeline Rue that played Khan's woman there.
Right.
She was really hot. There are a lot of them.
I have a little list of some of the guests, or other cast from. Julie Newmar was on an episode, right? Early on.
Yeah.
Jill Ireland, character actors like Roger C. Carmel was on there.
Oh, he was
Frank
great.
Gorshin we talked
Harry
about.
Mudd.
Eleanor Donahue from both The Odd Couple and Father Knows Best, right?
And
Charles
Andy Griffith,
Napier, right? David Soul was an actor in one of the episodes. James Gregory, who was later the lieutenant on Barney Miller, and we mentioned Mariette Hartley. So there were a lot of familiar, like Paramount. I'm sure they were all Paramount players at that point.
The guy who played Trelane, also, I forget his name. Very good character.
William Campbell
was in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yes. He had a sad end, I think, didn't he? I think he committed suicide or something.
Well, actually, that was Roger Carmel or Harry Mudd, unfortunately.
Oh, that's who I'm thinking of. Yes. Okay.
This is some cool trivia that you may not know, but if you remember Star Trek 4, which was a lot of fun, like Brian had said, there was that one big courtroom scene where they were trying to, find out if, eventually, Kirk becomes a captain again, but there was going to be a scene that ended up getting cut. They were going to have people like from Kirk's past come and provide testimony about how great Kirk was and everything. And rumor has it that they were going to have Harry Mudd, Roger Carmel, play Harry Mudd again, and he was going to testify for Kirk, and it was going to backfire. But I think he died right around that time and committed
Oh,
suicide. And having him in that movie would have made it even better. It would have been out of this world.
that's too bad. That's a missed opportunity. Like I would look out for stuff like that. Like you can see Janice Rand in a couple of brief
Right.
moments. The
Right.
yeoman. Who? Oh, Kyle
Nurse
is in
Chapel.
one of them. Nurse
Yeah,
Chapel. Well, Nurse
Kyle's
Chapel
in
has a
Wrath of
pretty
Two.
solid part in the first movie. Like she's all
Right.
over that. But Kyle is on one of the other starships, and he was the one that had been the transporter chief, right? I think on the Enterprise.
Yeah, he's in the Wrath
Right.
of Khan. Mm-hmm.
Right, Wrath of Khan. That's right. I loved
Mhm.
spotting those little things. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Gotta love it.
Exactly.
Gotta love it.
Exactly.
And you gotta love Star Trek. I mean, again, I look at Star Trek the same way I look at 1970 when I discovered wrestling on TV. It's something that I stumbled into looking for more comedy, actually, and I stumbled into it, became a lifelong fan of that original series. I will admit I have not followed Star Trek throughout all its permutations. I just haven't. I got older and I had other things to do. But if you want to talk about one of my favorite TV series of all time, it's right up there. And
Mhm.
now I want to go home and watch the Starship Enterprise sliding through the cosmos, if it's all right with you guys.
Me too.
I'm gearing up my son to prepare him to show him. He's 8 years old now, and I think he might be ready. I've been trying to sort of get him excited about it, and I'll jump back in and watch it all over again.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Be cool to watch it through his eyes.
Right.
Nimoy had a great story that he told once. Nimoy told this story at a convention that I was at, where he talked about how he didn't even think about it. Like this was years ago when they had flip phones. The smartphones weren't even out yet.
Right.
And he said he was out somewhere and he got a phone call and he opened the flip phone and put it to his head. And a guy walked by and was just like marking out over the fact that it's Spock and he's got like a communicator and he's flipping it open. And he just thought like, oh, that's awesome. You're Spock. And who's calling you, Captain Kirk? And Nimoy said he didn't even think about it. He didn't even realize it. And he was like, oh, you're right. We have this now. We have this technology now. We have communicators.
Well, wasn't it Dick Tracy with the watch that did all kinds of
Which they
things?
finally caught up to that with the Apple.
Exactly right. What other things from old sci-fi? Well, microwave ovens, maybe? I'm not even sure.
Still no flying cars.
Well, that was the
hopefully.
Jetsons was the microwave oven, actually. Except
Right.
that they would press a button and it would say roast, and a roast would pop out.
I question the science of that show, I have to say. I don't
No,
think
not
it
good
was
science. Is
very
the
hard
Jetsons,
science.
No, not good. Well, anyway, I'm thankful to have these two gentlemen here, that's Steve Gennarelli and Brian R. Solomon, as we take another look back at the stuff we really liked when we were younger. And that's the whole idea of this outdated entertainment hour. And these guys are entertaining in their own right. I want to start with Steve. Steve, tell these fine folk where they can find you, what you're up to, anything under the sun. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, thank you. Bob, I've been recording Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam, and we have some new episodes coming out soon, and they've all been good. So I hope you're listening. I hope you enjoy them, and I appreciate anybody that listens to them.
Now, you're on Facebook, right? We want people to get a hold of you. You can write to you on Facebook, right?
Yeah, they can. I get lots of requests. Some I have to turn down, but most I do accept. So
Such is life. And Brian,
Yeah.
you are always busy. You have a major book coming out in the fall. Tell the folks all about it.
Yeah, well, I feel like I was just talking about it last time, but I'll do it again. I have a book coming out, which is a biography of Gorilla Monsoon. It's called Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. It comes out September 30th. It's going to be in digital and print And I also just recently learned that we are going to have an audio version, although I don't know if I'm going to be able to record it myself this time because of some kind of weird contractual things that they have with their voiceover people, but hopefully I will. But comes out September 30th, and I'm going to be talking about it all through the summer, and I'm hoping to have a cover design soon to be able to share with people. So I'm excited about that. I also want to mention one thing, since this is a non-wrestling show, I actually have something non-wrestling to plug. I thought I would plug.
Let's hear it.
So there's a magazine. It's a UK magazine called The Dark Side, and they are all about science fiction and horror, mostly horror. And I have started now writing semi-regularly for them. So you can find them at thedarksidemagazine.com, but their most recent issue, number 264, I have an article on there in that magazine on speaking of gorgeous women with Star Trek, but the women of Italian giallo films. You know what giallo films are? They're like
Yeah.
the kind of like murder mystery sort of B movies of the 60s and 70s. And I wrote an article about the women of those movies, the scream queens of those movies. And in the next issue, I think 266, which isn't out yet, I'm going to have an article talking about worlds colliding about the Santo and Blue Demon adventure movies, the lucha libre movies of the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So I'm getting to write about and branching out a little bit, writing about movies and sci-fi and other things that I love.
And somehow, with all the things you do, you manage to balance the family work balance. Nobody does it better than you do.
Who said I have it balanced? I don't know where you get this idea.
It seems like you do. You know why? I find it very heartwarming, though, that all the time you're putting pictures of your family on Facebook and we did this together, we did that together. I find it really, really cool. I really do, because it's
Thank you, Bob.
it's a hard thing to do. I mean, you have a big fan. I never had any kids, so I don't even put my own picture on Facebook. So it's like, I got nothing to show off. It's
Well, I'm grateful in a way because I have, I've been married twice and I have 2 adult kids, and I have a very small kid who's 8 years old, and it's a different experience, and I'm like, I don't take it for granted being a parent again at my age, where I'm like approaching grandpa age. I mean, my grandfather was my age when I was born, so I mean, like, but you come at it from a different way, I guess, when you have a chance to do it all over again. I feel much more grounded now than I did back then. And that's probably why you see that balance in my life. You probably wouldn't have seen that much in my 20s and 30s when I was a parent back then, and I was running around like a chicken without a head and working for WWE and all that stuff. But, I'm in a very good place and I have nothing to complain about.
And Steve, you seem to be in a good place too. Enjoying the sunshine down there. Is life as nice as it seems this time of year?
Uh, yeah. This time of year in Florida is nice. I mean, we just had baseball spring training here, so I got to see my beloved Yankees. Brian's a big fan too. I got to see him a few weeks ago, and now that the Rays are playing at George Steinbrenner Field, we have Major League Baseball outdoors, which is rare, because usually they're playing at Tropicana Field in St. Pete. And my brother's going to come down from Chicago in June, and I know he wants to go to at least a game. And I'm really big into MLB. I follow it very closely, and I know you fellas both do too. And it helps me get through the summer months when I'm not podcasting or working my regular day job. So
Yeah, baseball's another thing I can't quit. I'm still into it too. I really am. And it's like I'm a weird baseball fan. I have no favorite players, and I follow the Mets, but it's only because I've been following them since I was a kid. But I like the sport within the sport. I'm like a Stratomatic brain when it comes to baseball. I like to manage along with the managers rather than cheer a certain star or something like that. I like the
okay,
nuts and
okay.
bolts, the strategy. Maybe I'm kind of gearhead that way, but baseball is fascinating when you sit down and just try to manage along with the 2 people in the opposing dugout. That's the enjoyment of it for me. But maybe I'm strange. I don't know.
Well, as a Yankees fan, I have a really big problem these days because I have the issue with what Yes Network has done, which is horrible. Like, so Yes Network, basically they got all these cable companies have been dumping them because they're too expensive to carry.
Okay.
And so I don't have cable anymore. I recently dropped it and I have YouTube TV. But the problem was my cable service dropped Yes years ago. YouTube TV doesn't carry Yes. So the only way for me to regularly watch Yankees games would be to get Yes as a standalone separate app. It's obscenely overpriced and I can't justify look, I love the Yankees, but I'm not gonna sit there and watch every single game. I'm not that kind of a fan, and I can't justify spending that much money. So I'm in a tough spot where I actually rarely get to see them anymore. I see them when they're like game of the week or Amazon Prime will put an occasional game on live, and I watch them in the postseason, but I cannot regularly watch Yankees games anymore on
Well,
TV. When you get those rare ones, I could actually check it out.
And I don't think I'm wrong about this too. I think the Yankees have moved. They used to have the Yes app, and now it's called the Gotham Sports app, which features both the MSG stuff and the Yankees, and you pick what you want a la carte
Right.
and buy it that way. But it ain't cheap. And you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to buy it for a whole year because the other half of the year they're just showing, Casey Stengel tributes, right? So,
Well, I mean, it costs more than Netflix, it costs more than Disney Plus, more than Max, like all these different
Way more.
streaming services, which no
Yeah.
offense, that those services give you a lot more things to watch. And I just can't justify it.
Yeah, I get it.
I could afford it. It's not going to break me $30 a month, whatever it is, but it just the principle of it.
Well, let me make this other thing about MLB that's really getting my goat too. And it has nothing to do with money.
Let's hear it.
You can't figure out where the games are broadcast now. They're on 7 or 8 different platforms. There's a Mets
right.
game this weekend on Roku. That's what it's on, Roku. Or is it on Apple TV? Or is it on ESPN? Or is it on Fox? Or is it on SMY? Or is it on and so on and so on
I have
and so
to
on.
Google it. I have to go
Yeah.
in. I have to try and Google it. Like, where's this game playing? I remember my dad losing his shit when they started, because my dad's a Mets fan. So I grew up watching the Mets on WOR9, and he lost his mind when they started moving the games onto cable TV.
Right.
Okay. How could you do this? How could you make people have to pay money to watch baseball on television? Whatever it was, 90, 91. How could, baseball's on television supposed to be free to watch? I mean, it was like the controversy to end all controversies. And to think about, and meanwhile, back then, there were plenty of games that weren't televised in any way. You just couldn't see them at all. They were like house show games. You had to listen on the radio or be there. And to think about what it's come to now, oh my God, unthinkable.
Well, I see people writing letters to the newspaper here, the New York locally, and they write things like, "Back in the day, I used to see every single Met game on Channel 9." No, you didn't.
No, you did.
No, you did.
Nope.
No, none of the local stations had every game. That was the advent of, the cable services that produced every game, or the network that the team chose to be aired on. Like,
And it was
you used to have
Channel.
Sports
That
Channel.
was the beginning of it. Yeah, Sports Channel.
But it is frustrating because you have to spin the big prize wheel to figure out where your team is on a certain night. So I don't know what
I'm
to say.
tempted
But
to go back to being a Mets fan just so I could watch, Fox Sports and be able to more easily see the games. It's just
Steve, are you able to see your Yankees?
You know what? I mean, I'll tell Brian this advice. I mean, I have MLB Network. I watch the network. The Yankees are featured a lot on there. So I watch them on there. I watch them on TBS. I watch them on ESPN if they're on there, or Fox Sports 1. I don't subscribe to any Yankee service like Yes or whatever, but I feel like I see them enough, honestly.
Well, you could get every game down there, MLB TV.
Yeah, I gotta.
You're out of market.
I don't want to put my wife through that. I mean, she'd rather sit with me on the sofa and watch a Netflix movie or something. So I'm happy with that.
I get it. We all have too much choice, don't we?
Yeah, my wife loses me basically in October. I'm living in another dimension, and she knows that. Like, once we get to October, especially if the Yankees are really doing well, forget it. That is the one time of the year where I really become an obnoxious sports fan. I don't want to know from anything. I'm watching the game, and that's it.
Well, anyway, I'm thankful that I still have access to my teams. I'm thankful to be a podcaster, and I'm thankful that I have two of the finest podcasters here with me. Brian didn't mention Shut Up and Wrestle. It's Shut Up and Wrestle on the Arcadian Vanguard Network, and John here is also on the Arcadian Vanguard Network as part of the Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam podcast. If the two guys are looking at me right now, I had to close my eyes to remember all that because I'm old. I am so old, my social security number is 12.
When you were born, the Dead Sea was sick.
That's right. I'm so old, there are younger faces on the coins in my pocket. Yes, I could go on all night, folks.
When you went to school, there was no history.
That's right.
I know them all.
We better leave with a laugh. Folks, it's Steve Gennarelli and Brian R. Solomon. I value your friendship, guys, and you do great shows, and thanks for making my shows better all the time. I really appreciate it, guys.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Live long and prosper, guys.
Live long and prosper. We're all doing the hand thing now. Here,
Yes.
did I do it? There it is. There it is. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. It's a generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more, finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, there you have it. A chance to lighten up, have a little fun with one of the great TV series of all time. And a little bit of tidbits here and there, discussing the past. And what two better guests can you have on one show than Steve Gennarelli and Brian R. Solomon? Great gentlemen both. Write to us at outdatedent. It's outdatedent@gmail.com. Our website is outdatedentertainment.buzzsprout.com, where you can hear all of our shows FOC, free of charge. We're into our second year now, and there's plenty of great shows for you to check out there. My name is Bob Smith, so you can find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singing with B.B. King. And also, you can find vestiges of me as outdated_Bob at X. I'm also at Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. I've made quite a few Instagram friends over the course of the last 6 months or so. It's just happened by osmosis. So I want to thank everybody for writing there. And there you go. By the way, if you want to know where this show is heard, if you go to outdatedentertainment.buzzsprout.com, that website, there's a tab there that says About, and there's a list of only about half of the places we can hear this show. It's also available on YouTube if you prefer that over traditional podcast apps. All you're going to see is our placard for the show, which looks like a record album cover. But in any event, it's the same show in beautiful high fidelity. You can just stare at my handsome visage as it peeks out at you from your from your Roku box or your TV screen or what have you, or your cell phone. Don't do that. So in any event, yeah, don't look at me. You know, some people say, "Oh, you have a really nice voice," and then they see me, and then they run for the hills. So in any event, we got a lot more fun coming your way in the future editions of the show. I'm trying to dig up some guests that may surprise you. I've decided we're going to do a second underrated rock guitarist show. Looking forward to doing that one too. We'll have a special guest for that one. Hoping to have our friend Joe Puccio, the entertainment maven from GenerationXWire.com. He'll be on the show again hopefully soon. And many of our other podcasting and entertainment business friends. I'm aching toward doing a show on Dominic Triano, somebody who not a lot of people know about. Why would you do that, Bob? He's not that famous. You know what? I don't care. I'm trying to make him famous. You hear me? Same way that I'm trying to make Jerry Jaffe famous on my other podcast, right? I want to make Dominic Triano famous. Give him the plaudits he's so long deserved. Pass around some of his music so you can enjoy hearing him too. What a guitarist. So that'll come up in the near future. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for listening once again to the Outdated Entertainment Hour. I love the Ringo All-Star Band shows. I think they're going to come out this summer. At least I hope they do. And if they do, you know what I'll say to you? Peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.